So here we are today. We are getting ready to go into the harvest. So in preparation for that, we are studying our gospeling tools. We use what we call my story and his story. Well, today we're practicing my story, and this is where we tell our testimony in 1 minute or less. Okay, so she's going to do one where she shares her testimony in a minute, and I'm going to share one that is less than 30 seconds. Okay? So with that, Kim, go ahead and show them how to do that.
Okay, so basically, my story is what you would explain before you met Christ, and then your experience when you met Christ, and then after living for Him. And so basically, my testimony would be before I met Christ, I felt unwanted, and I never felt loved or connected to my adopted family. And through a series of events in my life of running away from the Lord and rebelling against His commands, I found myself in a state of brokenness. And one day my friend invited me to a church, and they talked about the parable of the lost sheep. And so I had never really felt that kind of love before. And so that day I completely surrendered my life to Jesus, and I felt for the first time truly loved. And so now, as a follower of Christ, I have meaning and I have purpose in my life. And now I just want to share the gospel and tell everybody about what Jesus done for me.
Okay, so that was just under a minute. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick example of my story in less than 30 seconds. So this is a great way to transition a conversation into a spiritual conversation so that you can ultimately share the gospel. Okay, so my story is when I was young, I grew up without a father. I was angry at the world and didn't know what I was going to do with myself. But then I come to know Jesus as my personal Savior and friend, and I realized He was my father. And then after that, I lived a life free of that anger, or certainly He helped me to deal with it. And now I'm a much more well-balanced person, and I live my life to glorify Him and not myself. So that's roughly about 30 seconds. So you would use that tool to tell people your story, and then you would usually end that with something like, "That's my story. Do you have a story like that?" And what you're doing then is you're using that as a spiritual test to see if they are in fact a believer, because a lot of people will say, "Hey, I'm a Christian," but when you ask them, "Oh, okay, tell me your story," they don't have a story of faith. So it's a way of kind of using it as a filter. So we hope you find this helpful, and we're going to be practicing and using this tool and getting you up to speed on those tools as well, so that you can go into the harvest with us.